A Promised Land, by Barack Obama. Introduction. Imagine a room deep in the White House. It's small, windowless, and packed with the most powerful people on earth. The Secretary of State is there. The Secretary of Defense. The Vice President. Generals, CIA directors, and you. You're the president. On a grainy, black and white screen, you watch silent figures move in the dark, halfway across the world. They are the most elite soldiers America has, and they are about to storm a compound. Inside that compound, you've been told, is the most wanted man in history, Osama bin Laden. But your intelligence isn't 100% certain. Your advisors are split. Some say it's a go. Others, including your own vice president, warn you against it. They remind you of a similar mission, years ago, that ended in disaster, costing another president his career. If you're wrong, your soldiers could be captured or killed. It could spark an international crisis. Your presidency could be over. If you're right, you will bring justice to a nation still scarred by the deepest wound it has ever known. The helicopters are approaching. A voice crackles in your ear, relaying information from the commander on the ground. Everyone in the room is looking at you. What do? That single, heart-pounding moment is just one story from one of the most anticipated memoirs of our time, A Promised Land by Barack Obama. This isn't just a book about politics. It's a profound look into the heart and mind of a man who made history, but it's also a story about you. It's a story about finding your place in a world that doesn't always make sense, about squaring your ideals with reality, and about discovering the grit it takes to lead when the stakes couldn't be higher. By the end of our time together today, you will not only understand the hidden architecture of power and the immense weight of the presidency, but you'll also discover the personal journey, the doubts, the fears, and the unbreakable hope that carried a young, unknown man from a search for his own identity all the way to the Oval Office. This is the story of a bet placed on a simple, audacious idea, that the world as it is doesn't have to be the world as it should be. Book summary. Every great journey begins with a question. And for the young man who would become the 44th President of the United States, that question was simple, yet profound: where do I belong? Long before the rallies and the headlines, Barack Obama was a young man wrestling with a mixed-up heritage that left him feeling like he was from everywhere and nowhere at once. The son of a white mother from Kansas and a black father from Kenya whom he barely knew, he spent his childhood straddling different worlds, from the laid-back shores of Hawaii to the bustling, impoverished streets of Indonesia. He saw firsthand the immense gap between the rich and the poor, the tensions between different cultures, and the subtle hierarchies that defined people's lives. He felt like an outsider, a collection of ill-fitting parts. And he sensed, with a quiet urgency, that unless he could stitch these different strands of his life into a coherent story, he might end up living his life fundamentally alone. So, he turned to books. His mother had instilled in him a love of reading early on, and it became his refuge. He devoured the works of great writers and thinkers, searching for answers. He was like a young tinkerer in a garage, gathering up old parts, not quite sure what he would build, but convinced they would be useful one day. This intellectual curiosity followed him to college, but it wasn't just about academics. He admits, with a touch of humor, that his reading list was often influenced by the women he was trying to get to know. Marx for the long-legged socialist in his dorm, Foucault and Woolf for the ethereal artist who wore all black. But through these halting efforts, a worldview began to take shape. He became a student not of politics, but of movements. He was inspired by the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement, people like John Lewis and Fannie Lou Hamer, ordinary citizens who joined together to demand something better. In their struggle, he saw a different kind of power, not power that puts others down, but power that lifts them up. This, he decided, was an ideal worth pursuing. He just needed to find a place to start. After college, he moved to Chicago to become a community organizer. The work was grueling, the victories small and often temporary. He worked in neighborhoods ravaged by the decline of the steel industry, trying to rally people who had every reason to be cynical. He learned to listen, to ask strangers to trust him, and to experience failure and get back up again. He learned that real change wasn't about grand theories. It was about fixing a park, removing asbestos from a housing project, or getting a stop sign put on a busy corner. And in those small victories, he saw how people stood a little taller when they realized their voices mattered. Most importantly, Chicago gave him an answer to his lifelong question. It was there, among the working-class families on the South Side, that he finally resolved the lingering questions of his identity. He discovered there was no single way to be black, just trying to be a good man was enough. He found a community. He found his purpose. But he also hit a wall. He realized that for every park they fixed, 1,000 jobs were being lost because of a distant CEO's decision. For every one after-school program they started, a generation of kids was being failed by underfunded schools. The power to truly change people's lives, he concluded, lay elsewhere. It was around this time that he studied the story of Harold Washington, Chicago's first black mayor. Washington's campaign was a political earthquake, a grassroots movement that had toppled the city's old political machine. In Washington's story, Obama saw a new possibility, that the energy of a social movement could be channeled into electoral politics. That maybe, just maybe, you could change the system from the inside. This was the seed that would grow into a presidential ambition. But it was also a choice that would test his most important relationship. Michelle LaVaughn Robinson was already a successful lawyer when they met. She was tall, brilliant, funny, and, as Obama writes, he was smitten from the second he saw her. But she was also grounded in a way he wasn't. Growing up on the South Side of Chicago, she understood that the road to a good life was narrow and full of hazards. You didn't take big risks. You relied on family. Success was something to be earned and protected, not gambled away on crazy dreams. And when this strange guy from Hawaii with a scruffy wardrobe walked into her life, talking about changing the world, she was both intrigued and deeply skeptical. She saw his optimism, his desire to choose the hard way every time. I think politics seems like it's full of people willing to do anything for power, she told him. I'm not sure you'll ever change that. Their love story is a central thread in the book, a beautiful dance between his idealism and her pragmatism. She became his anchor, the person who kept him honest and connected to the real world, even as his political star began to rise. And rise it did. His first run for office, a campaign for the Illinois State Senate, was a lesson in the brutal, bare-knuckle realities of Chicago politics. After being endorsed by the sitting state senator, Alice Palmer, who promised to step aside to run for Congress, Obama found himself double-crossed when she lost her race and decided she wanted her old seat back. His advisors, Carol and Ron, saw an opening. Palmer's last-minute petitions were a mess, filled with invalid signatures. They could challenge them and get her knocked off the ballot. Obama hesitated. He didn't want to win like that. He wanted to beat her fair and square. His campaign manager, Carol, looked at him with a mix of affection and fury. If you let this go, she told him, you might as well go back to being a professor. 'Cause politics is not for you. You will get chewed up and won't be doing anybody a damn bit of good. It was a crucial lesson. He learned that fair play was a noble ideal, but in the world as it is, he didn't like to lose. He challenged the petitions, and he won his first election. But that victory was overshadowed by a profound loss. Just as his campaign was getting underway, his mother, who had been diagnosed with cancer, took a turn for the worse. He was in Chicago, busy with his grand pursuits, when his sister Maya called from Hawaii. "I think you need to come now," she said. He booked a flight for the next morning, but it was too late. A few hours later, Maya called back. Their mother was gone. The shame of not being there, of being so consumed by his own ambition that he missed that final moment, would stay with him forever. It was a stark reminder of the sacrifices his path would demand, not just from him, but from those he loved. His time in the Illinois State Senate was frustrating. As a Democrat in the minority, he was what they called a mushroom, kept in the dark and fed. Well, you can imagine. He learned that in politics, good policy often didn't matter as much as power and pressure. The futility of it all weighed on him. And then came Malia. The birth of his first daughter in 1998 changed everything. He was overwhelmed with a joy so profound it reordered his universe. He promised himself that his kids would know him, that they would always feel his love and know they came first. But the juggling act of 3 jobs, state senator, law professor, and civil rights attorney, put an immense strain on his marriage. The arguments with Michelle grew more frequent, fueled by exhaustion and her feeling that she was doing it all by herself. "This isn't what I signed up for, Barack," she told him one night, her voice filled not with anger, but with a deep sadness. "Is it worth it?" It's a question he couldn't answer. And in that uncertainty, he made one of the dumbest choices of his life. He decided to run for Congress. He challenged the incumbent, a former Black Panther named Bobby Rush, and was utterly destroyed. He lost by 30 points. The race was a disaster from start to finish, leaving him broke, humiliated, and with his marriage more strained than ever. He was almost 40, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he had taken a wrong turn. He realized his ambition wasn't just about service, it was about ego, about proving himself, about filling some hole inside him. He had become the very thing he'd warned himself against, a politician, and not a very good one at that. After that crushing defeat, something shifted. He let go. He refocused on his family, on being a better husband and father. He found joy in the small moments, reading Harry Potter to Malia, watching baby Sasha laugh as he nibbled her feet. He started thinking about a life after politics. It should have been enough. But 2 things kept pulling him back. First, the political landscape in Illinois changed, giving Democrats more power and him a real chance to finally pass meaningful legislation. But more importantly, he couldn't shake a deeper conviction. As he traveled across the state, from the inner city of Chicago to the small farm towns downstate, he saw that people, no matter their background, shared the same basic hopes and values. He realized that our politics would never change as long as we remained strangers to one another. And the audacious thought began to form, what if a campaign could bridge those divides? Not a congressional race, which was too narrow, but a statewide race. A race for the U.S. Senate. It was a breathtaking gamble. As his friend and future strategist David Axelrod told him, it was a huge reach. His name rhymed with Osama. He was coming off a humiliating loss. The odds were long. But Obama saw an opening, a narrow path to victory. This time, he promised Michelle, would be different. This was it, up or out. If he lost this one, he was done with politics for good. Michelle's skepticism was legendary. When he tried to explain his financial plan, that if he won, he'd write another book and the advance would cover their expenses, she laughed. "You have some magic beans," she told him, "and you're going to plant them, and a huge beanstalk is going to grow. Is that it?" "Something like that," he said. She gave him her blessing, but not her vote. "One last time," she said. "But don't expect me to do any campaigning." The 2004 Senate race, which had seemed so unlikely, turned out to be charmed. His early opposition to the Iraq War, once a political risk, now looked prescient. His Republican opponent dropped out after a scandal. And then came the phone call that would change his life and the course of American history. He was invited to give the keynote address at the 2004 Democratic National Convention. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. He didn't just write a speech, he wove together the entire story of his life, his search for belonging, his faith in the common threads that bind us, and his unwavering belief in the promise of America. He remembered a phrase from a sermon by his pastor, Jeremiah Wright, "The audacity of hope." The speech was electric. On that stage in Boston, he found his voice, and in that voice, the country heard an echo of its own highest aspirations. "There is not a liberal America and a conservative America," he declared. "There's the United States of America." He was shot from a cannon. Overnight, he became a national phenomenon. He won his Senate race by the largest margin in Illinois history. But he barely had time to catch his breath. The whispers started almost immediately. Will he run for president? He tried to be a workhorse, not a show horse, focusing on his job as a junior senator. But the tide of expectation was too strong. Senior figures in his own party, like Harry Reid and Ted Kennedy, urged him to consider it. "You don't choose the time," Kennedy told him. "The time chooses you." The decision to run for president in 2008 was the hardest yet. It was another disruption, another gamble, another step in a direction he wanted and Michelle truly didn't. In a tense conversation, she finally laid it all out. "Did you say we?" she asked. "You mean you, Barack. This is your thing." Her voice choked with emotion. "God, Barack. When is it going to be enough?" It was a question he couldn't answer. He knew the race would be a brutal, soul-crushing marathon. He was up against a political giant in Hillary Clinton. He knew the odds were against him. But he also knew that this was the point of reckoning. He had made a bet a long time ago, a bet on himself, a bet on America, and he had to see how it played out. The 2008 campaign was a crucible. The early days were a grind. He was grumpy, exhausted, and frankly, not a very good candidate. He was too wordy, too professorial. But his team, led by the brilliant and disciplined David Plouffe, built a revolutionary grassroots organization. They focused relentlessly on the first contest in Iowa, believing it was their only path to victory. They built a campaign not around a candidate, but around a movement, empowering hundreds of young organizers to build connections in communities across the state. The Iowa caucus was a stunning upset. Obama won decisively, propelled by an unprecedented turnout of young people and first-time voters. The victory proved he was a real contender. But just as quickly, the tide turned. He lost the New Hampshire primary just 5 days later. The press wrote him off. It was a brutal lesson in the highs and lows of politics, but it was also a test of his resilience. That night, to a disheartened crowd, he gave one of the most important speeches of his campaign. He found a new mantra, a simple creed that summed up the spirit of his movement: "Yes, we can." The battle with Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination was an epic, state-by-state slugfest. It was a clash of generations, of styles, and of two different theories of change. But it was also a fight that forced him to sharpen his arguments and find his voice. Nowhere was that more true than in South Carolina. After a brutal racially charged campaign, he won by a 2-to-1 margin, proving he could win not just in overwhelmingly white states like Iowa, but with a diverse coalition that looked like America. The nomination was finally his, but a new challenge loomed: John McCain, an American hero. and the world was falling apart. The financial crisis of 2008 exploded just as the general election was heating up, a full-blown meltdown of the global economy. It was a once-in-a-generation crisis, and it landed squarely in the middle of a presidential campaign. In a moment of high drama, McCain called for them to suspend their campaigns and return to Washington to solve the crisis. It was a political stunt, but one that could have easily worked. Obama made a different choice. He argued that a president has to be able to do more than one thing at a time, and that the crisis made it more important, not less, for the American people to hear from the two men who wanted to lead them. It was a defining moment, a display of steady leadership when the world felt unsteady. He won the presidency on a wave of hope and a promise of change. But on his very first visit to the Oval Office as president-elect, George W. Bush gave him a sobering dose of reality. "The good news, Barack," Bush told him, "is that by the time you take office, we'll have taken care of the really tough stuff for you. You'll be able to start with a clean slate." It was a statement so disconnected from reality that Obama was left speechless. He was inheriting 2 wars and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. His team's first full economic briefing was so grim that his advisor called it his holy shit moment. The economy was losing hundreds of thousands of jobs a month. The financial system was on the verge of collapse. The auto industry was about to go under. There was no clean slate. There was only a storm. His first year was a blur of crisis management. He pushed through a nearly $800 billion economic stimulus package, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, an effort to stop the bleeding and prevent a second Great Depression. The political fight was brutal. He got it passed with almost zero Republican support, an early sign of the relentless obstruction he would face for the next 8 years. Then came the fight for health care. It was the great unfinished business of American society, the cause of Ted Kennedy's life, and a deeply personal issue for Obama. The battle for what would become the Affordable Care Act was a year-long, legislative street fight. It was a messy, sausage-making process, filled with backroom deals, compromises, and moments where it seemed all was lost. The loss of Ted Kennedy's Senate seat in a special election in Massachusetts in early 2010 seemed to be the final nail in the coffin. His own chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, told him it was time to scale back, to settle for a smaller, less ambitious bill. But Obama refused to give up. He knew this might be his only chance. He put his entire presidency on the line, and with the masterful legislative skill of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, they pushed the bill across the finish line by the slimmest of margins. The night it passed was not just a political victory, it was a promise fulfilled. But for every step forward, a new crisis seemed to emerge. In April 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, unleashing the worst environmental disaster in American history. For 87 agonizing days, oil gushed into the ocean from a hole a mile beneath the surface. The live video feed of the leak became a symbol of a crisis beyond anyone's control. It was, as Obama writes, like a malevolent presence, actively taunting him. The spill became Obama's Katrina, and his approval ratings plummeted. He was in the barrel, tumbling through the crashing waters, powerless to arrest his descent. While wrestling with the economy and the oil spill, he was also commander-in-chief. He inherited 2 wars. He began the slow, methodical process of winding down the war in Iraq. But Afghanistan was a different story. The situation was deteriorating, and his military commanders, led by General Stanley McChrystal, were asking for 40,000 more troops. The debate over the Afghan surge was one of the most contentious of his presidency. It pitted his anti-war instincts against the unanimous advice of his generals. It was a debate about strategy, but it was also a fundamental test of civilian control over the military. After months of grueling meetings in the Situation Room, he chose a middle path, a surge of 30,000 troops, but with a firm timeline to begin bringing them home. It was a decision that satisfied no one completely, but it was his decision. It was the lonely burden of command. And then, in the midst of all this, came the whisper. A lead. The best one in a decade. A courier, a compound in Pakistan, and a mysterious figure who never left, pacing in a small garden. The intelligence was far from certain. The risks were immense. But after months of secret planning, on a Sunday afternoon, May 1, 2011, he gathered his national security team in the Situation Room. He watched in real time as 2 stealth helicopters slipped into Pakistani airspace under the cover of darkness. He listened as one of the helicopters clipped a wall and crashed into the compound. And then, after 20 excruciating minutes of silence, he heard the words that would echo around the world. Geronimo Ekia, enemy killed in action. Osama bin Laden was dead. The mission was an unqualified success, a moment of national catharsis. But for Obama, it wasn't a moment of exuberant triumph. It was a solemn reminder of the unity of purpose that was possible when the nation faced an external enemy. And it left him with a nagging question: was that the only time such unity was possible? Could a nation rally with the same focus and determination to educate its children, or house its homeless, or heal its sick? It was a question that would define the rest of his presidency, and it lies at the very heart of this powerful, introspective book. A Promised Land is the story of a man navigating the treacherous currents of history, but it's also a story about the country he led. It's a testament to the belief that even in the face of impossible odds, deep divisions, and our own human imperfections, progress is possible. It's a story of the world as it is, and a relentless, sometimes heartbreaking, and ultimately hopeful quest for the world as it should be. Commentary. As you close the final page of A Promised Land, you're left with a feeling that's both inspiring and deeply sobering. This isn't just a highlight reel of a historic presidency. It's a look under the hood of power, and what you find there is more complex, more human, and far more challenging than you might ever have imagined. The single most powerful lesson that I believe this book offers is about the constant, grinding tension between idealism and pragmatism. It's a theme that runs through every page. Obama begins his journey as an idealist, a young organizer who believes in the power of ordinary people to change the world. But time and again, he's confronted with the messy, frustrating reality of the world as it is. He learns that to get anything done, you have to make compromises. You have to cut deals. You have to, as his campaign manager told him, understand that politics isn't always fair. Think about the decision to challenge Alice Palmer's petitions in his very first race. The idealist in him wanted to win on the merits. The pragmatist knew he had to win, period. Or think about the healthcare bill. The idealist wanted a simple, single-payer system. The pragmatist knew that to get anything passed, he had to work within the existing, complicated system, even if it meant making deals with drug companies and insurers. This is a profound lesson for anyone with ambition, especially for a young person like you. It's easy to stand on the sidelines and criticize, to demand purity from our leaders and our institutions. It's much harder to step into the arena and get your hands dirty, to accept that progress is often incremental, and that half a loaf is sometimes the only thing on the menu. The book forces us to ask ourselves, is it better to hold out for the perfect solution and risk getting nothing, or to fight for an imperfect victory that helps real people right now? Another powerful theme is the sheer, crushing weight of the presidency. We see the public version, the speeches, the ceremonies, the walks across the South Lawn. But Obama pulls back the curtain on the private reality, the loneliness of the bubble, the constant scrutiny, the weight of life and death decisions, and the personal cost to his family. His description of the strain on his marriage is unflinchingly honest. Michelle is not just a background character. She is his partner, his toughest critic, and his anchor to the life he once knew. Her struggle to find her own place, to protect her daughters, and to maintain her own identity in the glare of the world's brightest spotlight is one of the most compelling parts of the story. It's a reminder that leadership isn't just about making big decisions. It's about managing the immense personal toll that comes with responsibility. It's about finding ways to stay grounded, to stay connected to who you are, when the world is trying to turn you into a symbol. So, what can you take away from this today? First, understand the power of your why. Obama's entire journey was fueled by his search for a place to belong, a way to reconcile the different parts of his story. That personal quest gave him a deep well of resilience to draw from when things got tough. Before you set out to achieve anything great, take the time to understand your own story. What drives you? What is the question you're trying to answer? Your why will be your fuel when your motivation runs low. Second, embrace the process. Obama's approach to decision-making, especially on something as complex as the bin Laden raid or the Afghan surge, was all about process. He listened to every voice, challenged every assumption, and created a space for dissent. He understood that in a world of probabilities, a good process doesn't guarantee a good outcome, but it gives you the best possible chance. So, in your own life, when you face a big decision, don't just trust your gut. Do the homework. Listen to people who disagree with you. Stress test your own assumptions. And finally, learn to live with the gap between the world you want and the world that is. This is perhaps the most mature lesson of the book. Progress is not a straight line. There will be setbacks, disappointments, and moments where you feel like you're in the barrel, tumbling out of control. The temptation to become cynical is powerful. But as Obama shows, the key is to hold on to your ideals without becoming rigid, to fight for what you believe in without losing your ability to see the humanity in those who oppose you. That was the book summary of A Promised Land by Barack Obama. We've touched on some of the major stories and lessons today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real power of this book is in the nuance, the texture, and the profound introspection that you can only get from reading it yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own experience in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've discussed today has sparked something in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning history. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you think about leadership, sacrifice, and the unending work of building a better world. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and maybe share it with a friend. It helps us continue to bring these life-changing books from the billionaire's bookshelf to you. Let's keep growing together, one book at a time.